feedback about last year. Went on about, I think, about 10:30 or 10:45 in the evening, so it was quite late. So we're trying to focus on our timeline tonight, schedule, the timing. So next we are hearing from Barry Kirker, who is representing the Institute of Criminal Justice and Forensic Psychology Institute. Welcome, Barry. Thank you.
Oh, he gets a clap intro.
So yeah, I'm Barry Kirker, and I'm a psychologist actually in private practice. My business is called South Auckland Psychology, kind of work in the southeast area of Auckland. I'm here talking about working in New Zealand basically as a forensic psychologist. And within the New Zealand Psych Society there's the Institute of Criminal Justice and Forensic Psychology, which is, there's no scope as such for forensic psychologists. So when I say forensic psychology, what do people think of? Maybe CSI? Yeah? Well, in fact, have you seen the new CSI Cyber? Have you guys heard of that or seen that? No, that's actually based on an actual psychologist. And the psychologist is a British psychologist. She's actually done a lot of the writing for the show apparently as well. But that's a bit unusual because normally those TV shows are kind of not really what psychologists, forensic psychologists get involved in. And certainly in New Zealand, as a forensic psychologist, you probably don't get to do anything as glamorous as you might see on those TV shows. So as I said, it's not a scope itself. So the forensic psychologists in New Zealand, or the people that are working in forensic psychology, either are people from overseas like Australia and England, which do have forensic training programs, and they come here, or else pretty much like myself, have a background in clinical psychology. So you start off by training in clinical psychology, but it doesn't have to be. You can also you can go through another pathway if you do general scope, and then you can go through Department of Corrections. But the majority of people will go through clinical psychology, and then they do an internship with the Department of Corrections, or even after they graduated, they'll start working in there. So most of the people that are forensic psychologists, or call themselves forensic psychologists in New Zealand, have sometime rather either worked for the Department of Corrections, or places like the Mason Clinic, which is like the mental health service for people that have committed crimes, and that's the Mason Clinic's Auckland service, and there's other services throughout the country. So you have that background, and then I guess a lot of it is essentially it's on-the-job training, and it really struck me during Amanda's presentation about how we learn so much at university. We learn a certain amount at university, but a lot of what we learn, and when we start to specialise in our careers as psychologists, definitely does happen once we start working and get into the work setting. And I think it definitely is the case with forensic psychology in New Zealand. So I'm going to be talking about what forensic psychologists do, and then I'm just going to probably take you through a typical week maybe of me, just let you know the sort of different types of work that I do. Bear in mind that I also do clinical work, but I'll just try and focus on the forensic psychology work that I do. So there's three areas, I suppose you could say, that forensic psychologists get involved in. Assessment is an enormous part of what forensic psychologists do, and the biggest part of assessment is what's called risk assessments. Yeah, and this is one of the areas, I suppose, we could say forensic psychology is different to the other areas of psychology. If you're a counselling psychologist and a clinical psychologist, you've got the person in front of you, and you ask them about what's going on. You kind of pretty much take, what they say as their accurate interpretation of it. Obviously, help them get some more insight about that, but you pretty much use what they give you in terms of your assessment. With forensic psychology, that's not really the case, because for forensic psychology, as it's applied, you're dealing with people that have committed a crime, or otherwise there's some concerns about them, and so you can't just sort of rely on what they say. So with your assessments, you've got to get other sources of information as well, and that's a crucial part of being a forensic psychologist, and one of the ways it's different, I suppose, to the other areas of psychology. And so what sort of other information would you get? Where you try and get it from many different sources as you can. We call it third-party information. The other difference about how we forensic psychologists work, and then is the environments. So again, if you're doing Aussie health psychologists are in the hospitals, as Iris pointed out, counselling clinical psychologists often working face-to-face with people. Forensic psychologists have to go to sort of more different environments like prisons, have to work in sort of environments like that which present a sort of different range of issues. So if you're interested in that area, sooner or later you're going to find yourself in prison at some time, and this can be an experience which takes a bit to get used to if you're not used to that, working in those sort of environments. So assessment, risk assessment, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute in terms of what that involves, but essentially it involves the use of different sort of tools or instruments as well. It's not just, there's a certain structured way to go about doing a risk assessment. The other area that forensic psychologists get involved in is treatment. And the word is kind of treatment in a way rather than counselling, and it's because of the idea that the person's got this problem that the society perceives it, and in particular the interest that people have is with high risk crimes, which are essentially sexual offending and violent offending. So forensic psychologists are most concerning themselves with those type of offending because it's the stuff that's most harmful to society. Yeah? So what I was saying earlier about how we're not just working with the client's perceptions, as sort of like Malcolm was saying in his presentation, we're also going to be reminded of, it's almost like we've got two clients when we're forensic psychologists. We've got the person in front of us that we're doing the assessment on, but we've also got society as a whole, because we've got to be mindful that what we're trying to hear is not only help this person change and be better, but also protect society. So that's a big part of risk assessments, but it's also a big part of how you prioritise who you work with as a forensic psychologist, because we know that violent offending and sexual offending is the most dangerous, if you like, to people in society, so that's the area that forensic psychologists most do their treatment. And a lot of treatment gets done in groups. Why do you think it might get done in groups rather than individually?
Money.
Well, it's more efficient, yeah? It's cost effective. Any other reason why you think you might do it in groups rather than individually?
Safety.
Safety? Safety for the therapist or for the other people? There's 8 guys that can attack you instead of 1. I'm not sure about that. That's from the therapist's point of view. But yeah, well, any other ideas about why you might want to do it in groups?
So peer support, like.
Well, there's support, but also these guys, yeah, people can call each other out on their bullshit, if you like, on their lies, right? Yeah. So these guys are all kind of can tell when someone's maybe not being completely honest, and they can challenge each other. So the research finds it's actually more effective treating people in groups. It's the power of the group to actually call people out, common themes, common issues, people are more likely to open up. So there's a lot of the treatment goes on in groups, which can be quite powerful. So if you're going to do forensic psychology, you have to get your skills up and do some group work. And it's a lot of on-the-job training. So a lot of university programs don't necessarily cover group work. But certainly if you work with the Department of Corrections, for example, you would get opportunities to run a group at some stage, starting off as a co-facilitator, and then maybe getting on to being the lead facilitator in the group. So a lot of group work occurs. But also, for me in private practice, I don't actually run any groups because I'm not really able to do it for various practical reasons. And group work is designed for the more serious type of offenders, which normally get the focus of the government resources. So in private practice, I will work with an individual, but I'll call someone who's lower risk, somebody that is safe to be working with me in private practice rather than necessarily having to be in a group treatment program somewhere. The third area of forensic psychology work in is training. Okay, so forensic psychologists get a lot of knowledge about criminals, about risk, about the factors behind crime. So that's called crimogenic needs. So when you're working as a forensic psychologist, you're always thinking about crimogenic needs. And it's no different, I suppose, when you formulate a case. When you formulate a case as a clinical psychologist or a health psychologist or a counselling psychologist, think, well, what's caused a person's depression? What's caused a person's anxiety? Whereas a forensic psychologist saying, well, what's actually caused their crime? And we will call that crimogenic needs. What are the factors? For example, a combination of factors like substance use, access to a victim, antisocial attitudes, antisocial associates, and these things can all come together. And so we sort of analyse that, and then when we do treatment, we have to sort of target each of those areas, if that makes sense. So in terms of the training role, so often forensic psychologists are training people like probation officers, prison officers. Recently I've been involved in some training with people who work for OT on assessing risk in young people and things like that. So as psychologists we have, as Malcolm was talking, a good level of knowledge that we can impart to others. So there's certainly a training role as well. So you do get a bit of variety, and I suppose that kind of reflects a typical week for me. Sometimes I do some training, I'm doing some risk assessments, and also got some clients that I see for therapy. So if you're going to be interested in working as a forensic psychologist, there's a few areas, I suppose, of things that I would think you have to have some confidence in or some skills in. The first one is having an interest in the law. Okay? Just like health psychologists need to know about medical conditions, yeah? Forensic psychologists need to know about the law. It's particularly criminal law. And so, yeah, you can read up on that, get some training that. You need to know how the court system works, how the sentencing system works, and also things like because one of the areas of assessment I do is fitness to stand trial. So it's risk assessment is one area. There's also this area called fitness to stand trial. It's to say someone mentally capable of actually going to court and standing trial. So there you're doing things like neuropsych assessments, cognitive assessments, etc. So you do need to know about how the law all works for that. Now people might say about insanity, you get to just work on working out if someone's insane or not when they commit a crime. That's kind of in the area of forensic psychology, but it tends to be more that psychiatrists do that. It tend to be that psychiatrists get those sort of jobs really more likely because it's considered to be more in the domain of serious mental health, which psychiatrists tend to work more in. Alongside clinical psychologists, but still maybe they still have more influence, I suppose, in that sphere. So that's an interest in the law is definitely one of the areas. Another area is you really got to have this be a bit like an investigator, a bit like a detective, if you like. Really wanting to get to the bottom of things. Don't take everything, at face value. Trying to make sense of, be quite critical with what you hear. I suppose alongside that, you need a little bit of cynicism. Not too much, but just a little bit, just to realise, well, actually, people do lie to you. People will lie to you, and that's where it's different, like I said before, to the other areas of psychology, where I guess you're dealing with people that generally they might lie to you, but it's not because they're trying to get something out of it by doing it. It's because they're in denial, have blind spots, etc. The other thing you have to be comfortable with if you're a forensic psychologist is going to court. In cross-examination in particular, because if you're writing risk assessment reports, you sooner or later you're going to end up having to go to court and be cross-examined on that. And there's different types of courts and hearings you can go to, but you have to be comfortable defending what you've got. And alongside that, I suppose, comes good report writing skills. You've got to feel that you can do good, logical reports that you can feel confident to defend if you are in court. So as I said, when you do risk assessments, you do draw upon various instruments and tools to help you. And so there's a lot of training you'll need to do to learn what those tools are, and you don't necessarily learn them all at university. So there's a lot of extra training. So professional development doesn't stop, and the whole field always changes. So I think it's true of all these areas of psychology, by the way. You just got to keep getting professional development, keep getting supervision all the time. It doesn't stop after you finish your program at university. How am I going for time, Jim? 2 minutes, okay. So, let's take you through a typical week for me then when I'm doing sort of forensic work. And once you get good forensic skills, it can extend to other areas of psychology as well. For example, I find myself now doing what we call fitness for work assessments. So, employers concerned about one of their staff members, they think especially these days under the occupational health and safety laws as it is, there's a responsibility for employers to actually make sure that the workplace is safe, and not only for the well-being of the individual, but also for everyone else in the workplace. So if you've got somebody who's doing some unusual behaviours, maybe dangerous behaviours in the workplace, they like to get that assessed before they can really make any decisions of what to do about it. So again, if you've got a good background in forensic psychology, you can sort of start moving to that area, which is kind of like, I wouldn't call it organisational psychology, but it's sort of workplace-related mental health assessments, if you know what I mean. The other area that I'm finding myself doing quite a bit of work into is for people that have come to New Zealand and got claims in as refugees, and they're saying that they've been the victims of torture and they've been victims of other things like that, and they've got a PTSD diagnosis. So that's kind of a forensic type report as well in a way, because you can't just go to the person and say, oh, I've got PTSD and I've got all these symptoms, because they can just read on the internet obviously what all the symptoms of PTSD are and say they've got them all. So you have to do quite a forensic evaluation, getting various lots of information to be able to try and work out if it's possible, if it's true or not, that diagnosis, including all the context of what had happened and what they said that happened to them. So I think once you've got those good grounding in forensic psychology, it's not like you have to spend all your time just at Auckland Prison seeing people, in a cold room out there doing risk assessments all the time. I think once you get good grounding in forensic psychology, there's lots of different things you can get involved in private practice, and that's what I try and do, have a bit of variety. I said before about fitness to plead, which is an area where you're assessing whether someone can actually go before the courts. And also sometimes I do some work supervising probation officers or other people working for the Department of Corrections. So I think I'll leave it at that. I think I've used up my time, but happy to take questions at the end. Thanks.